In today's episode of Silent Podcast, released on June 19th, World Sickle Cell Awareness Day, and the 1-year anniversary of Silent Podcast, we speak with Emerald and Tolu Adeyemi, who share the importance of knowing your sickle cell status, and also how their journey of love has been solidified through raising a child with sickle cell.
But you don't always have to be the rock. I think a lot of our best relationships are always developed, and certified and fortified through fire, through issues and times of trouble and tribulation. So I think that's how it is for us. It's like going through some of these things and just, having each other's back, for the greater good of the child. It just kind of solidifies everything.
Welcome to the Silent Podcast, where our focus is to strike out the silenced voices of those affected by sickle cell disease. We believe that by creating a platform to talk about real-life situations through the lens of sickle cell, we can change the stigma one voice at a time. Each episode, we will feature individuals who are changing the narrative of sickle cell. We hope that by sharing these stories, this podcast will inspire not only those living with the disease, but anybody that's listening to boldly persevere, confidently speak their truth, and courageously follow their dreams.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Silent Podcast. I'm Christina Lachelle.
And I'm Ijeoma.
And we are happy to be here with you today. We have a treat for you. We have a double guest today, and we'll tell you a little bit more about them. But before we get into that, Ijeoma, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm actually sitting in my niece's room in Houston. Not in my normal podcast space and area. So she keeps trying to come in to interrupt us, but we'll make it through. But yeah, no, I'm doing good. I'm excited. I'm happy that it's springtime, that this cold weather has passed us. So excited and ready to move forward. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. You said the cold weather has passed us. Speak for yourself in Houston. It was 50 degrees this morning, but it's warmed up. So it's really good. I'm doing well. I am excited for a summer. So things are really popping in the garden. I had 3 strawberries that were ripe that I ate, and they were delicious. So when you get back in town, Ijeoma, you have to have some strawberries from my garden.
Probably make a strawberry cake if you have enough.
Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully. Okay, so to our episode, we had an opportunity to speak with Emerald and Tolu Adeyemi, and they are parents who have a son, Tayo, who has sickle cell disease. And so it was an amazing conversation, not just because we learned so much from them, but also to see the synergy that they had with each other. Ijeoma, what was your favorite part of their conversation?
Yeah, I truly love to see their energy and their dynamic together. You can tell that they are truly in sync with one another, and they're there to be supportive and do what they need to do for their son. I truly liked how they talked about their one word that described their journey, which we'll get into when we get into the podcast, so y'all can hear that. But I truly liked how they brought that into where it brought them to where they are now, as they navigate being parents of a child with sickle cell and where they're at within advocacy for the disease. And that kind of brings me to our quote of today, which we call our voice of truth. Mm-hmm. There's no more powerful advocate than a parent armed with information and options. Rod Page. And so truly excited. So y'all can see how this quote really weaves into the discussion for the day. So ready to just jump right in there.
Yeah, it was a great conversation.
And here's a quick message from our sponsor.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome again to Silent Podcast. We are joined here with Emerald and Tolu Adeyemi, and we are happy to have them here. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. This is the first time on our podcast that we've actually had double guests, so that's really exciting. And Emerald, I'm handing you the mic.
Thanks, Christina. Well, first, I just want to say thank you for having us. We are delighted to even have been invited to be on your platform, the Ruby Ball Foundation. My name is Emerald Adeyemi, and this is my husband, Tolu. He will introduce himself in a second, but we are both proud parents of Olutayo Adeyemi. He does have sickle cell, hemoglobin SC to be specific. He is the sweetest little boy, so joyful. His name, Olutayo, means God is my joy, or God brings me joy, and he definitely is a fulfillment of his name. He lives his name. Personally, or professionally, I should say, I work in the philanthropy sector to help actually transform philanthropy to make it more equitable. So my background is in the nonprofit sector, helping to raise funds primarily for community-based organizations. Most recently, I made the shift to work within philanthropy to kind of make sure that grant making is effective. If philanthropy exists to serve communities, I work at an organization that really pushes the needle to say, what can foundations do to make sure that the dollars they're investing in communities are actually being effective and are invested equitably across communities. So that's just a little bit about me. I'm from Houston, Texas. I love Creole food, yes. And I am a friend of Ijeoma, so thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you for having us again. My name is Tolu Adeyemi. I am the proud father of Olutayo Adeyemi. A little bit about me. I was born in Nigeria, born in Lagos, moved to the States when I was about 3.5, 4. I moved from Oklahoma to New Jersey. New Jersey is where I grew up. Now I'm living in the DC area, which is where I met the lovely Emerald Adeyemi, Emerald Stewart at the time. A little bit about me, I enjoy sports. I played football in high school and college. I'm in finance, so not as exciting, as interesting as Emerald. I work for money. Pretty boring, but I guess it pays the bills. I've learned a lot, through raising Tayo for the last 1.5 years about sickle cell and the different challenges and the many things you have to look out for. So I'm excited about this podcast. I'm glad to be on it. It's my first time being on a podcast, so let's make it happen.
Thank you. I really truly appreciate y'all taking the time to be out there. And so with the Nigerian and the Houston roots, so I find that connection between the both of y'all. And so I know that y'all spoke in terms of what your journey has been. What would you use to say your word that describes your journey through sickle cell with your son?
So if I had to choose a word, I think the word would just be, I don't know. I want to say curious, and I say curious because I don't know a lot about it, or I didn't know a lot about it. And so I'm just constantly investigating, researching, just trying to make sure I remain curious and ask the right questions to folks so that I can be informed as a parent.
That's a good word. I think for me, the word I would use is unknown. Because as much research as I do, as much things as I find out, everybody's story is different. Everybody's journey is different, even, beyond the different types of sickle cell. They all have different experiences. Some are more severe, some are less severe. So, what's to be expected, we just don't know. And, that's probably the hardest part about this.
Yeah, no, thank y'all. I appreciate it. So just even how you said with unknown and curious, prior to you becoming parents, during the process of you all dating, did you each know that y'all had sickle cell trait?
Mm-hmm. So you want me to start this?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, okay. So being Nigerian, I think we all know our status because it's such a big thing in Western Africa. So I always knew I had sickle cell trait. Both of my parents have sickle cell trait. So, and I have 2 other siblings, and it's funny, we talk about it all the time. My 2 siblings, I have the trait, my sister has a trait, my brother doesn't have the trait. Oh, wow. So, odds are very small of that happening, but we were very lucky. So I've always known I've had the sickle cell trait. Even when we were dating, I asked her, if she had the sickle cell trait. And, of course, she didn't know specifically what type she had, because it's not big or as big in the country. So, of course, I knew it was something my parents talked about, growing up. It's something we had to watch out for and be cognizant of. So that's my story.
My story is I had heard of sickle cell. I knew people, or like in church, there were friends who, I don't want to call them friends, but there were families of people who I knew had sickle cell, but I was not at all familiar with it. I had heard of sickle cell before. And then, you know, obviously with dating Tolu, he mentioned that he had sickle cell trait, like told me that story actually about his parents and how his brother doesn't have it, his sister has sickle cell trait. I actually found out that what I have is called hemoglobin C. So I have a mutated gene. And so I actually haven't even heard it be referred to as sickle cell trait. They just consistently called it hemoglobin C. And so it was when I was very early in my pregnancy journey, probably 7 weeks pregnant, and they do, you know, blood draw just to run tests for various genetic disorders, like just different blood, you know, tests. And the nurse called me to give my blood results, and she was like, okay, yeah, going through everything. And she's like, you do have hemoglobin C, but that's not a concern unless your partner has sickle cell or sickle cell trait. And then I was, wait, what? It was like, well, my partner does have sickle cell trait. And I had never even known that I had hemoglobin C. And I guess there's really no reason to know that you have hemoglobin C, or there's no like, I don't know. I just never knew that I had hemoglobin C until I was pregnant, doing blood work. And maybe it showed up in prior tests, but it wasn't until I called Tolu, and, you know, they suggested we talk to a genetic counselor just so that we could be aware of what the chances were of Tayo having sickle cell.
So that's really interesting. This is my first time ever hearing about hemoglobin C mimicking sickle cell trait either. And I just recently learned that there are like 5 different types of sickle cell. So SC isn't one of the more common ones. We have like SS, which is the most common one. And then we have sickle cell thalassemia, which is another common one. And then Ijeoma, you have that one, right? And then there's SC, and then there's like SF, and there's another one. So I'm curious, and maybe I may be jumping ahead, but I'm wondering about the severity of SC and how that shows up. And if you want to come back there, if you want to finish, like kind of connect the dots or build the bridge a little bit more, feel free. But I am curious, so I'll put a pin there and let me know if you want to jump there or not.
Yeah, I'll kind of connect the dots a little bit. So, because I remember getting the call from her. She said, hey, the doctor said I have, you know, hemoglobin C trait, you know, and I was like, what is that? You know, I've only known of sickle cell trait, and they're saying, you know, I have a chance of 1 in 4 chance of this. And so I thought she was mistaken. I was like, there's no way that's something, right? So then I started researching, and I didn't find a lot. So when you start researching, there's not a whole lot on there's a lot more in SS, and a lot of the research we're steering towards SS. But when I finally found things on SC, I said, okay, this is a possibility of something, right? And, you know, and I think going back to my word of unknown, that's when the unknown started, and it kind of still goes on to this day, because most of the research is geared towards SS. Most of it is. So anytime you're looking at, you know, what's the severity, you know, it's a lot of, well, it could be this, it could be that. We know what SS is, we just don't really understand or know what this is moving forward. So yeah, that's still where we are to this day.
Yeah, and I would say, even in going to the doctors, they treat Tayo as if, you know, he has sickle cell. Like when we go to the doctor, it's not like, oh, you have SC, it's okay. Or, you know, he has sickle cell. And I think that's important for me, even in being an advocate. Like it's not important for me to say like, oh, my son has SC, like he has sickle cell, and we are serving as advocates for sickle cell in all the different forms that it shows up. So it's just
because I would say, like, even for me, like growing up, I didn't know that much about sickle cell, because you would know, Tolu being Nigerian, like they don't like to talk about anything. And so like, even though like my parents, they both have the trait or whatever. And so with both of my parents have the trait, me and my twin brother, we got sickle cell, my younger sister. So 3 of us have sickle cell. And then my younger brother has the trait. And so growing up, my mom was always like, doesn't want to talk about it, didn't want to say anything. And so like, as I got older and better started understanding, and I asked my mom like about sickle cell, she told me I had SS or whatever, but we did used to, like, I was in the hospital a lot when I was younger. But then it wasn't until I got older and I was having some type of complications, and then my actual hematologist here took a blood test, and that's when I found out that I had sickle cell beta thalassemia. And then I started trying to research sickle cell beta thalassemia, and I couldn't find anything on it, because it's like you said, like majority of the information is around SS. And so that's kind of hard. But then, like you said, like it's good that in general, at the end of the day, I'm an advocate for sickle cell as a whole. Because regardless of how it shows up, it still affects individuals, you know what I mean, in a similar fashion, regardless of how many crises you may have a year, or within a month, you still show similarly. So it's just being able to like let people know in general, like you have advocates all around, no matter what type of sickle cell that you have.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how was like the pregnancy journey? Did you know that your son was going to have SC before he was born, or you were just?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that was really very early on when we even found out that there was a possibility. That was like first trimester. And then you have all these other tests, you know, you just get into like the pregnancy journey. And they did recommend that we talk to a genetic counselor just to like see what his life could look like if he had it. But I was like, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. If he has it, like we'll go see a genetic counselor. I didn't want to go to another appointment to meet with somebody to talk about like the ifs and all that. And I would have made the same decision now. Like I don't regret not going to the genetic counselor when we weren't sure. Now he was born September 1st, and I want to say every newborn child goes through a newborn screening. And so it was maybe 3 days after he was born that his pediatrician called, and she's very like professional, so she wouldn't tell us over the phone, but she was like, I need you all to come in tomorrow, it's important. And so I think kind of right then we knew what it was. And since then we've just continued to like just do research, ask questions. I definitely cried just because it's from a moment of like, I don't know what to expect. Like, what does this mean? And those questions still exist. He's 20 months old now, and you know those questions still exist, and they probably will continue to. But I can't say my pregnancy journey was too different, because we didn't know until after he was born, and I wasn't kind of like sitting around like stressed or worried about it. It was a matter of like, when we get there, we'll cross that bridge.
Yeah, I don't think we thought about that often afterwards.
Yeah.
It was more so, you know, the big things. Does he have, you know, Down syndrome? Okay, he has that, right? Does he have 10 fingers? And so, like all those things started happening. Heartbeats, you know, that's what you start worrying about. I didn't really think about it, you know, until we got that call. And I remember, like, as soon as we got the call, I was like, Emerald, I think this is what it is, you know, and just going back and forth with that, and like, oh wow, what could this mean, right? Immediately start going to the Google machine, and looking at everything, right? And I was in there just looking at morbidity, mortality rates, like everything, right? It's like I want to know it all. I want to know what to expect, you know, because that's how I am. I just have to know. I have to know every little detail, just because I don't want to be blindsided anyway.
YouTube was a big, like, seeing people's journeys, or watching YouTube.
Even YouTube, though.
People's stories.
Even YouTube, it's like hard finding SC people, right? It's always SS, and you know, it's just like, okay, that's their story. You know, I found one person that had SC. I found two people that had SC. This person had a severe case, and they were talking about their struggles. And then I found another person who had SC. I didn't find out until he was almost 30. That he had SC.
Yeah,
so,
wow.
I said I didn't know until I was 36, and when I found out that I had sickle cell beta thalassemia. Wow. So I grew up my whole life thinking that I had SS, because I didn't know all of the different types of sickle cell. And it wasn't until my friend Ebony had passed away, that's the one that caused me to create the Ruby Ball, that I even had an understanding of what sickle cell was and some of the things that I was dealing with as an adult with sickle cell. So like, yeah, that's crazy. So I know y'all talked about like your thoughts on the doctor calling you. I know, Emerald, you said that you did cry a little bit. So like, what was like the first thoughts that went through your mind when you found out that he had sickle cell? Like, how did you feel initially?
Well, because I think I was familiar with pain crises like a little bit. And so I think it's just a matter of like, will I be able to provide him with the support, and like, what is it that I'm going to be able to do to make his life, quote unquote, like as normal as possible? And I think it was just a matter of wondering how it would alter his life. Will he be able to be active in sports? Will we be able to, is this going to be like a financial addition? Like, are there solutions that we can help, or is this just a matter of like, we'll have to deal with it? I think was more so not knowing that.
Yeah, this is interesting because a lot of these things I'm about to say, or that we're about to say, we probably haven't said to each other, just because you kind of wrapped up in your own thoughts. You tell your partner kind of things that are sugar coated, and that's how I was. But I was feeling initially like, you know, what isn't he going to be able to do?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, I played sports, right? Oh, he can't do that, or he can't do this, or he can't do that. Right. I went really negative first. Like, and that was one of the things where I was just sitting there like, man, he's not going to be able to be, you know, quote unquote, like me, like what I did, you know. I think, and research helped me out a lot, because it was dark for a while. I was like, man, this is terrible, you know. And I kept a very, very positive attitude, like, oh yeah, he's gonna be fine, you know, because I know how Emerald, like, you know, gets, you know, it's for me, it's if I'm down, it's not gonna help the situation. So you'd
be strong for me.
Yeah, of course. You got to. You know, you're very emotional. So you got to be the, you know, the voice of reason or the calm. But yeah, I think initially that's what I thought. Until you started doing your research, you started seeing, you know, there's folks who do this. There's a basketball player who's trying to make it to the NBA a few years back that had sickle cell SS. Yeah. He played at a major university. Like, all these things that, you know, why can't your kid do it? Right? You know, give them all the opportunities that they can, and let's see how it goes. You know, let's not live out of fear. Let's live out of promise.
And I think it's too good for that, because you do look to the, like, oh, who are the celebrities that have sickle cell, right? You look to the people who have grown old with sickle cell, and you say, like, oh, the president of Howard, Dr. Wayne Fredericks, like, he has sickle cell. So those are kind of like encouraging stories. But then you know that there's another side of that I don't know the exact age, but like the average person with sickle cell died at like mid-40s, or like, oh, this was years back, it's gotten better now. But also, like, that was a stark reality too. Like, is he gonna live a long and full life? And so it's just like balancing the reality of both. You know?
Yeah, and that's part of why we even created the Ruby Ball to begin with, is to be able to show that different side. Because like you said, like, I'm sure when you were Googling and YouTubing, it's like you kept seeing people in the hospital and like the grave side of everything. But then it's like you don't really get those like bright stories to let people know that are living with the illness, you can still live a full life, right? Still achieve your dreams. You can still travel the world. You can still do these things. You just have to understand your body, understand your illness, so that you know how to navigate your life with this disease. And so that's part of what we were seeking and looking to do. Because I even remember, I don't know how old Tayo was when you reached out to me on Instagram, just to be like, hey, you know, like, I found this out, and I was like, whatever it is that you need in terms of a resource, like, just know that I'm here, and like, I don't mind like sharing whatever information to help you like get through that situation. So
I also think it's about like the people that surround someone with sickle cell. So I you obviously you don't know my story. I have sickle cell trait. I didn't find out I had sickle cell trait until I was in my 20s, because when my sister was diagnosed at 7, my mom and I got tested, and my mom and I both came up negative with sickle cell trait. So it wasn't until I was talking with my doctor, and I was like, hey, my sister has sickle cell, but technically this doesn't make sense because my mother doesn't even have the trait. And she was like, well, let me test you and see if there's something else that could mimic sickle cell. And as we know now, there are many other things that can either mimic or mix with sickle cell, and you can get sickle cell disease. And when she tested me, I found out I had the trait. So my mom is still not testing positive for the trait. So it's a very interesting situation. But one thing I do remember about growing up is that my parents were always very much uplifting of my sisters and my sister and me. And there were no limitations. And so I say it's about the people who are surrounding the person with sickle cell, because sometimes people assume, oh, they have sickle cell, they can't do this, they can't do this, they can't do this, right? And then they put limitations on them. My sister was a childhood actress in a Broadway musical where she went every single day, like up until she was like 13 years old. So there really were no limitations on what my parents thought that we could do growing up. So I think that's also important as well.
It's very important. And so like growing up, same with sickle cell and having family, like my brothers, they played sports in elementary, middle school, high school. Just even, you know, I mean, like I said, my younger brother, he's the one who has the trait. My older brother, he's the one who also, my twin brother is the one who has sickle cell. But in middle school, like they still like were on the football team and stuff. So like that's one thing I did appreciate about my parents, is that they didn't like allow us to like be limited, like because I had long legs, like they tried to get me, not my parents, but the school tried to get me to run track. I told myself I'm not doing that. But I'm not doing that, but at least the option was there. And so that's the big thing outside of just having sickle cell crises. The thing with people with sickle cell is like they don't want to be seen as different from anybody else.
Yeah.
And so they don't want to feel as though they're being limited. And so like that's where that pride like comes in. But then it's like you have to find that healthy balance, right? In terms of like understanding what you can and you cannot do. But then also knowing like you have that support system there for you to be able to try to do those things that you're capable of doing.
Definitely. And it's funny you say that too, because I mean, obviously, so Tyler was born September 2019. His first summer, it was COVID, so there were no pools open. But I have read that sometimes swimming can be a trigger for, symptoms. And so he hasn't yet taken a dip in the pool, but I'm leaning into the like Emerald, like I don't put limitations on him that may not even need to exist.
Yep.
That's just something. I'm glad that you said that, because it's something that I know I'm gonna have to exercise, because you want to try to like just protect him and
yeah, definitely let him get in that pool, girl. Like that's what people try to tell me. They're like, because I travel a lot. I love to travel, and they're like high altitude. They're like, are you sure that you need to be traveling? Are you sure? Like when I moved to Gabon, people were like, do you need to be moving to Gabon? And I'm like, I didn't have a crisis the entire time I was in Gabon. Like the first crisis I had, I was visiting back the US. And so like, that was a blessing to me, because I was able to like go to hospital here in the United States. But then it's like the second time it was, but I was at least there for almost 2 years before I had an actual crisis when I was living out there. And I would never take back that experience that I had in Gabon. And if I limited myself and said like, oh, I can't live in this country because of my disease, then I would have never got to experience that. And so like those are some of the things to just think about and know. And like at the end of the day, like God's got you. You know what I mean? Like covered by the blood, and he'll be just fine. So my next question that I was going to ask you is, has he had, because like you said, like he's almost 2, has he had any crises yet that y'all know of?
No, not that we know of. He has had one serious hospitalization, and that was more so what they told us was inflammation of the lungs. But I will say it was his infection or inflammation.
It was pneumonitis. It was basically an infection.
An infection in his lungs. But because of his sickle cell, what you say?
I said that's a blessing. It didn't lead to a crisis. Since
exactly.
One of the, like things that would cause a crisis.
And that's what I was going to say. With his sickle cell, things are doctors, which they should be, and I appreciate, are so much more cautious around kind of like what's happening. Even small procedures, it's like a little bit more extensive care for him because of his sickle cell.
Yeah, you should. I mean, do you want to go into that story?
We can. Yeah. You probably better off, because I don't want to cry.
Like I said, she's emotional. So let me be the strong one for her. But no, this one. So funny enough, he started his first day of daycare, right? And Emerald was very hesitant about this daycare in particular for a number of reasons. So when he came home, he was fine. About bath time, he started making this like weird noise, and we were quite sure what it was. But as parents, we were a little concerned, but not super concerned. We're like, all right, this just sounds a little bit, maybe if he sleeps it off, it'll go away. And he was sleeping, and I think what got us is he's still making noise while he was sleeping. And I called my mother, and she was like, oh, call his pediatrician. Call the pediatrician. The pediatrician was like, yeah, take him to the ER just to make sure that he's not struggling to breathe. And we didn't think he was struggling to breathe.
Telling too much detail. You gotta just like, it's a podcast too. You gotta keep people engaged.
I'm sorry.
Let him tell the story.
Okay.
Yeah. So when we got to our local urgent care, he was like, nothing's wrong. I don't hear anything wrong with lungs, but I can't tell since he's so young. Just take him to the ER at Howard.
Howard County.
Howard County, yeah. So we took him to Howard County, and she was with him the entire time at Howard County because of COVID. They only allowed one parent back there. And this is probably where she could tell the story better. But and the doctor that was there, because of his sickle cell, I mean, she just raised it to level 10.
Yeah, and I will take it from here because I was there in the room. So it was kind of like, okay, he's like, I hear this weird wheezing noise when he's breathing. He seems fine. It was also like 9:30 at night, so he just wanted to go to sleep. So the doctor kind of came in, and she just was, and I'll be brief. Just I don't want to talk too much about the hospital, but long story short, I was telling her what his symptoms were, and like it was kind of like as soon as I named that he had sickle cell, it was like, okay, like where's it? And he's seen at children, so he's under care with children's hematology. But as soon as I said he had sickle cell, it was like, we have to transfer him to children's because that they know him, like they know his history, which makes sense. But then it was like, okay, we have to helicopter flight him, and okay, we have to put him on ventilator. And it was just like, my baby just got a little, I don't think it's this serious.
We thought it was indigestion.
Yeah, I thought he just was like stopped up from eating such a big dinner. But that for me, that experience, and we both said to ourselves, going forward, if we have any like concerns, we're taking him straight to children's because they know him, like they know, and that's just a small thing. When like you have a child who does have a condition, and instead of like we'll just go where we know instead of like you can't just go to a hospital, go to urgent care, because people, not all doctors feel informed enough to really make the right decisions, and then there's liability as well. And so we both agree going forward, even if it's an extra 35-40 minute drive, we're going to take him straight to children's because we're confident in their care. We love children's, and they are familiar with him as a sickle cell.
Very true.
But he ended up spending 5 days in ICU on the ventilator. Like, it was intense. But if you see him now, you would never even know that was his experience.
Yeah.
Do they know what caused that?
So they think he was eating dinner and a food particle went down the wrong airway, which then irritated his lungs. That was kind of the hypothesis, but we still had no firm kind of like, this is what happened. Exactly.
So 5 days in ICU, that sounds, on a ventilator, that sounds intense.
Yeah.
And then like to add COVID to it, has COVID really has it heightened your anxiety at all around Tayo's illness?
In the beginning, yes, because I think there were, again, so many unknowns. It was kind of like, is this, what does COVID mean for sickle cell patients, and then specifically children with sickle cell? Because then they're saying COVID isn't affecting children as aggressively. So the one place, so I kind of was very comfortable with shutting it down, being like, okay, we're not going anywhere. No one's coming to the house. My husband's family, my in-laws, who I love dearly, were a little bit more laxed about, the visitation. And like, obviously this is their grandchild. Tayo was 6 months when the COVID came. And so it's like, we want to see our grandbaby too. Like, can't let this time go by. So for me, the biggest, or I would speak for myself, the biggest challenge was navigating the visitations from family and wanting to be super cautious about that, rather because I was so comfortable just being like, we're not going anywhere, he's not going anywhere, during COVID.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Emerald and I, we go back and forth with which parent is more easy about different things. I think with the COVID thing, I was very less worried than she was, especially when it came to family and everything. Just because everything I heard with children and even sickle cell specifically, we didn't hear or I didn't read anything that was, they're more prone to this or it could affect them in any way. So, maybe after the first couple of months where everybody's kind of on high alert, I was more relaxed with it for sure. And then family visitations, all of that, I was kind of ready a lot sooner than she was. So, just still navigating that, especially now that it's almost over, that everything seems to be winding down. It's more so like, all right, I'm kind of ready to go back to life. Like, get him out. He's going to be 2 in September. Like, let's get him out. Let's get him with as many kids as possible. Let's get him back in the mix, especially since he's not going back to daycare. You know, I think socialization is important, you know, with kids.
And I have to, again, just give a shout out to the team at Children's, because we literally can pick up the phone and call, like, if not the actual doctors, like one of the doctor's assistants, or just someone who is always able to answer those small questions, like, is it okay for him to go out and play with the kids, or should he be in a pool? I feel very supported by the hematology team at Children's, for sure, to help navigate it.
Yeah, that's definitely really good to be able to have that background or whatever with the doctors and have that relationship with them for certain things, so that you know, like, where to go and what to do as you're moving and growing through this process. So I guess I would say, just even like from that perspective and like knowing like the different things and talking again about the doctor, the hematologist, have they like recommended anything for you all to do in terms of medication or anything to use for Tayo? Have y'all looked into that? Like, where are y'all at right now in terms of his patient care?
All right. So in regards to his care, he takes penicillin daily, 2 times a day, just as a preventative.
Yeah.
He's not on, nor have they asked him to be on anything, you know, more intense than that. So hydroxyurea or any of those drugs, he doesn't necessarily need it at this point. His hemoglobin levels are high. So that's not something that we're looking to do unless that changes dramatically. You know, for him, they'll just monitor him. I think, you know, the better his hemoglobin goes, because when he started, his hemoglobin kept getting higher and higher and higher and higher. Every time he visits, it gets higher and higher. So I think for them, he's more of we'll just keep monitoring him every 6 months maybe to see if he changed. But he's been on very light treatment, and you know, I think the penicillin is just more preventative.
And I'll say, as an adult living with sickle cell, and like when I was growing up versus when I am now. So that is one of the things as children, like as you're going to become an adult, they don't have penicillin for you anymore. But as a child, I remember like in elementary school, having to go to the nurse to take my penicillin and my folic acid. So folic acid was also a big thing. I don't know if they recommended that y'all give him folic acid, but those were the 2 things that I would take growing up. And still as an adult, I'm supposed to take folic acid. I don't take it as much as I should, because I'm not really good with vitamins and pills and stuff. But those are some of the things to help with the blood and to like help from the preventative level. So that's good that they shared that with y'all, and y'all are doing that to try to like minimize his possibility of even having a crisis.
Yeah, and I think my head kind of went to when you were talking about like suggested prescriptions or just different things we could do. My head went to family planning, and so that's kind of where I got a little bit lost. And so they have mentioned, or Tolu is the one that's like always asking about like, what can we do? Like, is there any gene therapy like for, you know, if we were to have another child? And that's not something we've talked about in great detail. He's more interested in it than I am, but that's also another, just being honest and transparent with the podcast about the different things that we will have to navigate having a child with sickle cell. It's kind of what happens with child number 2 if we know, you know, that there is a possibility now. Yeah,
when she's speaking about gene therapy, she's really talking about, you know, taking the embryos, almost like IVF, and matching them with the embryos that don't have a sickle cell, the SC. So, you know, that's something that I've talked about with her. Is, you know, hey, if we could avoid this moving forward, you know, it's just like, you know, should we do it or should we not do it?
And then I'm like, no, the Lord got us. Like, you know, Lord, you know, that's kind of me, but you know.
So I want to say this: the Lord does have us, right? But He also has doctors.
Yeah, I know.
And He has scientists that have He has instilled great knowledge into. And I want to say that because, you know, when I found out I had sickle cell trait, I was in my 20s, and I remember having this daunting conversation with my doctor about how, you know, the dating world is tough, and now I'm dating with sickle cell trait. Right. And what is like, I was like, so not only do I have to, you know, look for this, and this, then I have to also consider that I might fall in love with someone and then they have sickle cell trait. And then, you know, so it was a doom conversation. And she, you know, was like, okay, that does not have to be a barrier to you. So let's take that out of the way. And I was like, it doesn't. So Tolu, she explained the whole, like, you can take embryos and make sure that they don't have the trait. And then, you know, and obviously that's a more complicated way. And we don't, in our minds, we don't always want to go through that. But if you know that it, at least for me, I was like, if there's a possibility, oh, I can fall in love with someone who has sickle cell trait and be okay, right? And like not have to worry about having a kid with sickle cell, because, you know, I personally wouldn't knowingly go into that, you know. So because I grew, my sister has SS, and there have been a lot of severe crises, and I just wouldn't want to bring anyone into the world knowing that I could to give them SS, you know. So
it's funny you said that.
Sorry, what you saying?
Me living with sickle cell, like just like how you said, totally. That's as I've gotten older, those were some of the things that I've like looked in. But I would say like when I was younger, growing up and like dating people, I didn't necessarily think about it from that perspective, because I did think from the side of like I wouldn't want my child to like have to like navigate and deal with the things that I had to deal with. But I also thought like, but I survived. So it's like I also like thought about it from like what people would want to see as my like weakness was still my strength, right? And so it's like I thought about like it, how you said, Emerald, like whatever God has for my life, like that's what will be, and God will like, you know what I mean, see us through, because like people still live full lives. But then as I got older or whatever, like those were some of the things that kind of made me be like, oh yeah, I can't necessarily date this person because they have sickle cell trait, and I want to think about it for the future of my child. And so like now as I've gotten older, I'm starting to think about it from the perspective of like even the embryo stuff, to be like, okay, well, so I know like even from the trait perspective, like what is it that I can try to do to like try to navigate that for their future.
So you know, dating, you guys ask like who you're dating if they have the trait, and when do you ask? Because for me, I never asked that question until we got really serious, and it was like, all right, this may be something that, you know, we need to talk about. You know, I don't even remember when I asked her, but I asked her and she's like, I don't know what that is. Oh, she doesn't have it.
Now honestly, now I do. Before I didn't. So like I remember there was a guy that I was dating, and I remember he had the trait. And so we were still kind of, or probably like a few months in or whatever, but I was like, yeah, I can't really date you. So I started like kind of mentally checking out or whatever. But then for him, he didn't understand. He like, I don't understand why it's such a big deal to you, right? And so I feel like now, like as I've started becoming more of an advocate for sickle cell and being more vocal, because I really wasn't that vocal about like my sickle cell like experience. I like talk about it in the beginning or whatever, and ask about like if you've been tested to know like your sickle cell trait, just in general conversation. And like majority of people now, they know like that I do this. So like I even remember like this was very random. Like I had like met some guy, I wasn't really interested in like talking to him, so I wasn't like talking to him at all, like when he would ask me to like hang out and do stuff. And so like one time I ended up being in the hospital when I was in Houston, and so like he was hitting me up, and then I came back to like DC, and he was hitting me up, and I was like, oh, sorry, I was sick or whatever. He was like, what was wrong? I was like, oh, nothing. And then literally I was like, I had a sickle cell crisis. Crickets. Never heard anything again from this guy.
Wow.
Really?
So at the end of the day, it comes down to like what's supposed to be, and who's meant for you is for you, regardless at the end of the day. And it's going to work out. And shall see with you too. Like who's meant for you is for you, and everything will work out the way that it's supposed to.
Yeah, I think because after we found out that Taya had, sickle cell, and I was like, you know, if we would have known this, would we have continued? Like, if we would have known this before, like that I had hemoglobin C. Like,
okay, this is a question I didn't want to ask you, so I'm so glad you're saying it. I was like, oh, I want to know, but but go ahead.
I don't remember what your answer was. But you can answer now.
No, I mean, the answer would have been yes. I think. Like even going back, my parents, I told you before, my parents both have the trait, right? So when they got together, you know, their parents were like, you shouldn't be together. And then when they were pregnant, when my mom was pregnant with me, the doctor suggested they abort the baby because this baby could have sickle cell, right? That's just how it was in Nigeria at the time. So, you know, if they would have done this, I wouldn't have been here. And then they would have known that, you know, I would have come out okay. Then my sister, and then my brother afterwards, right? So it's one of those things where even if I would have asked my parents, they would have said the same thing. They would have been like, look, you know, you trust in God, believe in God, and, you know, what will happen, he's not going to give anything that you can't deal with and you can't take on. Yeah. So I think maybe early on in life when I was more, you know, immature, I probably would have been like, yeah, no, I'm out. But I think as I've grown older and I've grown accustomed to kind of dealing with things and be able to juggle multiple things, it's one of those it's one of the things, if you love somebody, you want to be with somebody, you know, you can't let that stop you.
Yeah.
Right. You can't let the what, there's too many what ifs anyway.
Right?
You know, yeah. You know, what if they have a trait that you've never heard of that causes, you know, something to happen? We have neighbors who have a kid that has some sort of muscular disorder because of some gene therapy or some gene issue that they never knew about, right? So we can't sit here, you know, and judge our lives and say, you know, we can't be with this person because of something like this, right? You know, moving forward with technology and science, I don't know how deep we're going to get into that. There are going to be so many things that are going to, you know, help this disorder moving forward and other disorders. So I think we just have to trust the process.
Yeah. And then what's your answer, Emerald?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely. Yes.
She like Tolu said, she's like on like hard eyes looking at her husband like.
I think she was go back to that.
Pipe
Like,
down.
you think you were gonna go back to that world when you found like, it was
Okay, so for the people listening to this podcast, I really need you to go to YouTube and watch it because there are just some gestures that you are not seeing because you're listening to the podcast. OMG. I love you guys. And I do have a question that I've been wondering about as far as your relationship is concerned. Like, how has this brought you closer? This situation, learning that Tayo had sickle cell, brought you closer in your marriage?
You know, I think for me, it has just been, I don't want to call it an obstacle, but the word obstacle is coming to mind, that we have navigated together. And for me, it makes me more excited to like be with someone who we can talk through these things. You know, I think, you know, challenges are meant to make you stronger, as people say. So I think that that's definitely how it's been for us, not just with Tayo having sickle cell, but just different obstacles that have come up in the marriage. And so I've appreciated being able to, like, even when he was in the hospital and it was like us trying to navigate, like, just the emotional and the, like, Tolu thinks he's a doctor on the side. Like,
come on now.
So, like, it has shown us how we can, like, how we continue to complement each other in different ways. So that's I'll say that.
Yeah, I think for me, it's brought us together. I always say Emerald's emotional. I don't know that I would have realized how strong she was, you know, without this. And watching her in the hospital, watching her, you know, go through things, because like I mentioned before, with COVID protocol, only one parent can be in the room at the time initially when he had that whole situation. And it was Emerald for the first 2 nights, I think, right? First 2 nights by herself with him, you know, with doctors coming in, all the tests and the baby on a ventilator, which is very difficult to see. And, you know, she was strong the entire time. And, you know, it just makes you appreciate the person because you don't always have to be the rock. You can say, all right.
Yes. Oh, come on. Say it again.
I can finish before you start.
I'm sorry.
You know, but, you know, you don't always have to be the rock. I think a lot of our best relationships are always developed, you know, and certified and fortified through fire, through issues and times of trouble and tribulation. So I think that's how it is for us. It's like going through some of these things and just, you know, having each other's back, you know, for the greater good of the child. It just kind of solidifies everything. And
too, just having like Tayo having sickle cell, and like I did a birthday fundraiser during sickle cell month, and it's like, this is bringing awareness to this disease. And, you know, it's not for nothing, you know, it's not like, oh my God, he has sickle cell. It's like, no, how can we bring purpose to this? And even when he was in the hospital and had to do, you know, was on the ventilator, he had a blood infusion. And so we both were like, oh my God, thank God. So whereas like they gave him blood, but it wasn't a transfer of blood. It was just like, giving him blood to boost his hemoglobin. And we both were like, we need to be donating blood. Like our son just got, like, we need to make sure we do this because, you know, our son is being taken care of because of someone else's donation. And so it just, things you've never had to consider. I think it really has opened my eyes and just made me stronger in ways and also brought us together as well.
For sure.
And that literally took me to like, well, my next question, because I was going to say, like, where do we go from here? Like, in terms of advocacy, and where are you at in your advocacy journey, knowing that your son has sickle cell? But that's good that you brought that up with the like donating blood and how important that is, and some of the things that you learned through the process of dealing with a child that has sickle cell and knowing like why these things are important. So we have a blood drive coming up. It's in Houston on July 9th. And so we're looking to see, we might end up doing one in the DC area as well. But one of the things that I'm excited about with this blood drive is they're actually going to test people for sickle cell trait during the drive as well. Yeah. That's and awesome. So we're excited about that. They're only testing people that are of African-American descent. Which I thought was like some type of caveat, because we do also know through research that it's not only African Americans that have sickle cell. Like, we are the majority in the bunch, but there are other races and other groups that also have the trait as well. But we're excited about that. But yeah, we're looking to try to continue to do what we can from an advocacy perspective to like really get the word out there and get people to truly understand what are the things they can do and what are some of the things that they can help. So with that being said, like, what would you say, like, where are you at right now in your advocacy journey, and like, where do you go from here as you continue to take care of your son?
So for me, I think that it's continuing to learn, like, and speak about our experiences openly with people, like not being afraid of being shamed or labeled. If someone knows that he has sickle cell. We were just talking to one of our neighbors in our neighborhood the other day. We had just met her kind of, and she was asking us something, and I was like, yeah, he has sickle cell. And I just kind of said it, we were talking about COVID, and I was telling her how we have to kind of like turn up our precaution notch because he has sickle cell. And it was up there openly, where I think 6 months ago, I would not have been as comfortable just being like, oh yeah, he has sickle cell. So I think one piece of being an advocate is just being confident and comfortable with naming it, and not being shamed, or people labeling him, or, like you said, putting restrictions on him because they know that he has sickle cell. And then, wherever I see opportunities pop up, I'm happy. I mean, Instagram sounds silly, but like sharing posts on Instagram, just spreading awareness so that people know what sickle cell is.
Yeah, I would say it's evolving. It's one of those things where, I was looking to my job, whatever I donate, they'll match it for the year. Up to a certain amount. And I think I was donating like something like $500 or whatever. And we're trying to find the right, sickle cell organization to donate to. And we're struggling. Is it this one? This person?
I was about to say, you can't be saying that. Each other gonna be like, why you didn't hit me up?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. We were looking, and it was like, all right, is this going to the sickle cell part of the hospital, or is it going to the general hospital?
Yeah.
Or is this to this place, or is it going, are we sure where the funds are going? So, that's another thing that we're always looking for, is like the right organizations that it's going specifically for, sickle cell research, families that aren't as financially, well off, that have to deal with certain things, transportation, medication, whatever the case may be. Can we give to those people? Can we give people to help those out? Because, any parent that has a child that's, going through some sort of chronic disease, there are going to be a lot of expenses. Traveling here back and forth, or if there are hospitalizations, things of that nature. So, where different things that we can do for that. I've talked to Emerald too about, even my job. Maybe there's something I can do where we do a blood drive or something like that, where, because the folks that I work with will support whatever I do, and they'll want to help. So, we're still evolving, but those are things that we've thought about, internally.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so that's basically like the biggest thing, is like having that open like mind and being able to be there. Because just even like you said, Emerald, being open to just say like, I have sickle cell, because again, it goes back to it being a silent disease, a silent illness. And I knew me growing up, it was something that I didn't necessarily want to talk about, because my mom made me feel as though it was something I should be ashamed about. Right? But at the end of the day, it's like, it's not something that you can help. So if people better understand it, not just people living with sickle cell, but people outside of the sickle cell community know that it's something that's a hereditary disease. You only get it from your parents, right? And so like having that understanding. So, but if people won't know that if you're not vocal about it,
right?
And, like how it affects people. So how can you be a friend to somebody who has sickle cell? Like, what are some of the things that we can do? And only way people will understand that is if we talk about it and we're open about it. And then we can actually grow within the community to try to do what we can do to like come together.
Yeah, for sure.
So
Well, thank you both for having this platform, which is allowing us, because I think even as we're sitting here, we're like, we need to be doing more, or there's more we could be doing, so I appreciate you all inviting us to even share on this platform.
Yeah, no, you're
absolutely
doing sickle cell shirts that y'all have on now, supporting Princess and the book. And so there's various different avenues and different things, like you said, even just sharing little tidbits on Instagram, because that's where everybody is now. It's a whole social network in order to like share and disseminate information. So you're doing your part.
Thanks, Ijeoma.
So as we come to a close, as you think about like parents who might be in your same shoes, who are looking to start a family, or maybe who do have a family, and children that either have sickle cell trait or the disease, what advice or words of wisdom would you give to them?
Well, I would definitely say be in touch with Ruby Ball Foundation. Plug. But another website or paid resource that I found very helpful is Sickle Cell 101, because they really break it down to like the 101, and the most general basic questions are answered. So I would refer them to Sickle Cell 101. And as much as possible, build a close relationship with the hematology team at your child's hospital, or kind of wherever they're going for their sickle cell care. Build a really strong relationship with them as much as possible. And then connect with other parents. Just talk out loud. Like, we don't know who else is dealing with it unless we like open our mouths and really communicate. And then last but not least, just trusting God that his hands are in it.
I would say all those things, and do your research, understand the disease as much as possible, understand the implications of it. Emerald calls me the doctor, not because I am, but because I will tell a doctor if they're wrong on something, because I've read it 5 times, and you have to be your own advocate, especially for your kids. They're at your mercy, right? So you got to be their strongest advocate. If you know something is wrong, or it sounds like bullshit, like you gotta say that doesn't seem right. No, he doesn't have this. He has this, or this is the case, or whatnot. And even if you're wrong, at least it's a learning opportunity. But you got to advocate for your kids, because nobody else is going to. You're going to be your biggest advocate. So do as much research as possible and talk to people about it, because that's where you can look at different journeys and you can start to match things up, and that's really it.
Yeah. And that really literally took us full circle back to your 2 words of being curious and the unknown. And so through your curiosity and through your lack of knowledge, you you seeked out the knowledge that you needed in order to be that advocate for your son, to get you to where you are now, to continue to advocate and to continue to like learn more as much as you can in order to help other people. So we appreciate you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This was awesome.